5. The Shmospel of Dylan. Part 1. From Shimla to Dharamshala. I am Dylan Higgins, and this is my Shmospel. Thursday, April the 27th, 2006. In offering myself to Shoshana, I had clearly stepped on Shmeiki Baba's toes. He wasn't pleased, to say the least, and when Shoshana gave me the job of transcribing Sheila's words, Shmeiki Baba looked like he might have a seizure or turn into a fire-breathing dragon. Still, as we approached Shimla, I only felt love for Shmeiki Baba. It was his walk which had given me the opportunity to experience something so rare, including meeting Shoshana. And how beautiful she was, with her oval face, silky brown skin, olive green eyes, and long, thick brown hair. If I didn't know she was Israeli, I would have thought she was from South America. She had a killer smile, and a look in her eye of, let's see how far you're willing to go. She was unlike anyone I had ever met, and I was totally captivated by her. This is why, when she said that she was no longer Shmeiki Baba's girlfriend, I could not resist offering myself to her. By admitting my love for Shoshana in front of the group, I received new powers of calm and self-acceptance. This is what gave me the strength to bear Shmeiki Baba's glares. Meanwhile, I did my best to stay out of his way, and I tried to keep myself positioned so that Shoshana remained between us. As we walked, Shoshana asked me about my childhood, and I told her about myself, how I was born and raised in County Cork in Ireland, and how I come from what you might call a middle-class Munster family. I talked about my two elder brothers, Bobby, who now lives in Dublin, and Phil in Australia, and also about my dad, who is an architect, and my mum, who used to be a therapist. At the time, I was still shocked that they had split up after more than 30 years of marriage. My brothers and I couldn't understand why they had waited so long. When we were growing up, they rowed ceaselessly. Dad used to be particularly grumpy and got worse when he hit the bottle, which was quite regularly. He also couldn't resist humiliating us when we made mistakes. When I was in my early teens, my parents sent me to a psychologist to figure out what was wrong with me, instead of sorting out themselves. Shoshana asked me what I did when I left school, and I told her how I went to study economics and politics at Trinity College Dublin, and afterwards I got a job at Lehman Brothers in New York, where I became a successful trader. I was at a meeting in the World Trade Center on the day the aeroplanes hit, and it made me realize that I needed to focus my attention on personal development rather than on wealth acquisition. Soon after, I quit my job, sold my stuff, and flew to Costa Rica. There, I spent a number of years studying shamanism and spirituality. Shoshana asked why I had come to India and how I had met Shmeiki Baba. As she said his name, she turned to look at him, and instinctively so did I. He was staring coldly at us from the back of the group. "Don't worry about him, he'll be fine," she said. I continued telling her how I had travelled to Goa for a contact dance festival, and people there were talking about an English guy called Shmeiki Baba, who was about to try to walk from Goa to Dharamshala. I'd also heard there was a German guy called Sebastian who was going to accompany him part of the way. To me, this sounded like an astonishing journey, and I wanted to be part of it, so much so that after the Contact Dance Festival finished, I took an overnight bus from Goa to Pune to look for them. I did manage to locate Sebastian after a number of days, but by then Shmeiki Baba had continued north by himself. I was determined to find him, so I hired a driver to follow his most likely route. We stopped regularly to ask people along the way if they had seen a barefoot foreigner. No one had, and I was about to give up my search when finally a shopkeeper said that he had met Shmeiki Baba and pointed us in the direction of Indore. And so we drove straight there, and I continued my search for Shmeiki Baba. After 2 days, I managed to find him. I was delighted to see him and asked to join him in his pilgrimage, but he said that for the moment he needed to walk by himself, though he invited me to join him further down the road in Delhi. So I jumped on a train and waited for him there. Shoshana said that when she first met me in Delhi, I seemed very grateful to Shmeiki Baba. I remembered how I was and how impressed I was with him. Now I chanced another look at him, and he looked quite ragged and desperate, like a dropout lost in India. I did feel guilty for making moves on his love, but it was beyond my control. And on we walked until we entered Shimla from the west, past Anji and Summer Hill, and along the main shopping street known as the Mall. I was impressed by how European it looked, with its mock Tudor and neo-Gothic buildings. When we saw all the normal tourists, I felt I was part of something special. We walked past Scandal Point until we reached the Ridge, the main gathering place which connects the various hills of Shimla. There we were pleased to put down all our bags. Brother Crispin volunteered to go buy milk, and I got out the camping stove and the rest of the ingredients to make chai. Shoshana requested music, and Shmeiki Baba, Kamal and Simon got out their instruments, sat down on the ground and played songs, including my favourite, the lively Reiki Shmeiki, Fakey Makey. A crowd of locals and tourists formed around us, and some began to dance. Meanwhile, Crispin came back with locally sourced milk, and we made chai, containing a blend of black tea, cardamom, nutmeg, cloves, cinnamon, vanilla essence, and jaggery for sweetness. When it was cooked, Crispin asked Shmeiki Baba to bless it. Shmeiki Baba stood up, raised the pan to shoulder height, and poured a long stream of tea directly into small disposable clay cups which Crispin had placed on a cardboard box. Crispin remarked that barely a drop was spilled, and Shmeiki Baba said, "Yes, brother, the Schmidis will grow more frequent now." The chai was passed around and received as a sacrament. A man wearing a smart navy blue suit approached me and introduced himself as Vikram. He said he worked for the All Asia Organic Tea Company. He had heard of our pilgrimage to Dharamshala and of our tea making, and wondered if we would like his company to sponsor the tea for our walk. I brought him to speak to Shmeiki Baba, who said he was a particular fan of their masala blend. Shmeiki Baba introduced Vikram to Shoshana and said that it was up to her to decide if our walk should be sponsored. Shoshana said yes, and Vikram said how pleased he was that so many women were now calling the shots. Shoshana smiled, and Vikram explained that his company would like to present our group with a grand kettle to prepare the tea in, as well as a coolie, a porter, to carry it all the way to Dharamshala. This way, we would be able to make tea for as many people as possible along our route. Shoshana smiled and nodded, and Vikram said, "100%, we have a deal. I knew this would be an auspicious day." As it got dark, Vikram took his leave to make arrangements, leaving us with Kaku, a friend of his, who told us he would be honoured if we would stay as his guests. He led us back to his splendid guest house on Jakku Hill. Later in the evening, Kaku came to Shmeiki Baba and said, "There is some problem, and kindly I want to ask your help." Shmeiki Baba asked him what he needed, and Kaku said, "Please come with me, and I will show you and explain." Shmeiki Baba looked to Shoshana, who suggested that she and I go with. Kaku led us to a bedroom on the second floor of the guest house. "1 year ago in this room, a woman, she belonged to Poland. She died. Her good name Petra. She died because of food poisoning, but her soul cannot move on because authorities Take her body too quickly and fly Poland. Her soul stay here, said Kaku. How do you know that? Asked Shmeiki Baba. Because on full moon after her death, I am standing late at night outside guest house smoking cigarette when I see her standing next to peepal tree. She is beautiful and she is wearing long white dress. I wonder what she is doing out so late, without jacket and alone. I speak to her to ask if I can help, and she talked to me in strange voice, like she is speaking through her nose. And then I see she is not standing on ground. She is floating about 10 centimeters above, and her feet are pointing backwards. I am very, very frightened and run into house. I see, said Shmeiki Baba thoughtfully. And Kaku continued. Then my heart is paining, and I am confused because I want to see her again, and I do see her. Usually she sit by tree and look like woman, but I also see her as mongoose and as owl. Last time, 2 days ago, she lead me into house and into bedroom, even though door is locked. She go into bathroom, and I see bath filled with milk. She get in, still wearing white dress, and disappear under milk. I go forward to look what happened, and suddenly her arms come out of milk and pull me into bath. Under milk, she kiss me, and then she disappear and I fall asleep. Later, I wake up in bath, but there is no milk. But I am in love with her, and I cannot stop thinking of her, and my family fear she will bring my death. Please, Babaji, help me. I am really eating my brain with this. Don't eat your brain, Kaku, said Shmeiki Baba. You know, there are people who get married to ghosts and live happily ever after. No, sir, this cannot be. Please help me, said Kaku. Okay, said Shmeiki Baba. Thank you, said Kaku. I will need some hose pipe, 3 iron pots, some turmeric, soil, and a cigarette lighter ready for midnight, said Shmeiki Baba. Whatever you need, said Kaku. That is it, said Shmeiki Baba, and Kaku went off to prepare the things that Shmeiki Baba had asked for. As agreed, a few minutes before 12, Shmeiki Baba came downstairs with Shoshana and went outside. Shmeiki Baba placed the hose pipe in a circle next to the peepal tree. He entered the circle, sat down, and lined up the iron pots in front of him. He explained to Kaku that he was about to perform a shmeramini called Shmatma Shmanti. Shmeiki Baba sat meditating for a few minutes and then called Petra's ghost, promising to do anything in his power to finish off the work she felt she had left incomplete. He lit the cigarette lighter with one hand and with the other let pinches of turmeric powder drop onto the flame. He did this a number of times and mixed the burnt turmeric powder with soil. Then he announced loudly, "Thank you for coming, Petra," and he threw the mixture over himself. "Excuse me, Petra," he continued. "I mean you no disrespect, but you must understand I have to protect myself. Now, is there some way I can help you find peace?" Shmeiki Baba spent some time nodding. Finally, he turned to Kaku and said with gravitas, "Petra has gone now, and she will not be back." "Oh my God, I feel sad but also happy. What did she say?" asked Kaku. "She told me she got food poisoning just before her boyfriend left her, and she was unable to get up and asked for help, and this is why she died. She wanted revenge on her ex, but understood that this would not allow her soul to find peace. For this reason, she was willing to forgive him. She also said that her diary is still under the mattress in the room where she died, and she asked me to send it to her mother. After this, she slowly disappeared." "Thank you, Shmeiki Baba," said Kaku with tears in his eyes, and Shmeiki Baba stood up and hugged him. When we went back into the hotel, we went upstairs, and Kaku found the diary under the mattress in what had been Petra's room. Later, Shoshana asked Shmeiki Baba about the diary. He said, "Kaku forgot to lock the door after he showed us Petra's room, So I went back in there and put my notebook under the mattress for him to find. My writing is so messy, I knew he wouldn't be able to read it and wouldn't know the difference. Afterwards, Shmeiki Baba offered to send the notebook to Petra's mum for Kaku, and Kaku gave it to him, and this way the exorcism was complete. Friday, April the 28th, 2006. After sleeping under the stars for 2 weeks, it felt wonderful to wake up in a guest house, and in a smart one at that. I was sharing a room with Crispin. Shmeiki Baba was sharing a room with Shoshana and Genevieve, and we understood he was made to sleep on the floor. I was excited by the prospect of our spiritual femdom game, though I didn't yet understand what it would entail. At breakfast, Shmeiki Baba kept burping. Shoshana didn't like it and asked him to stop, but he carried on, and she asked him to stop again. And Shmeiki Baba said to Shoshana, "You should punish me so I don't displease you." "Oh no, darling," she replied. "Don't try that sort of manipulation on me. Either you find ways to obey, or I will concentrate on those who do," she said, looking at me. I tried to hide my smile and silently made the decision that wherever possible, I would be more compliant and helpful than Shmeiki Baba, and in this way I would win the greater part of Shoshana's affection. Shoshana continued, "Shmeiki Baba, wanting to be beaten is just a fantasy, and for this reason the beating will never be enough. Do you not see that it is really intimacy that you crave, but you are blocked from it by your fear of being vulnerable in front of the one you love? And while you say you want to be dominated, and you do find moments of surrender, you then snap back and get that look on your face that all women are crazy bitches. It's like you're caught between the archetypes of priest and slave, and you don't know which way to turn. The only way you will find transformation and healing in our relationship is if you do actually let go of control. It's just the same as with the guru-disciple relationship, and as our ultimate relationship with life. Surrender is the only salvation. If you continue to game our relationship, you will remain stuck in your own manipulations, and all this will be for nothing. In any case, if you don't shift, I'm not willing to go on with it." Shoshana paused and looked at Shmeiki Baba for his reaction. He was kind of frozen, and she asked, "Maybe Sheila has something to add to what I've told you." Sheila 11. Shmeiki Baba closed his eyes and Sheila did begin to speak. "Part of you curses the fantasy which drives you to be submissive to a woman. Let us unknot this double bind once and for all, for there is no deleting your fantasy. Your neural network simply will not allow it. You must accept it and learn to use it healthily. See the fulfillment of fantasy as a door rather than a room. It is not the destination, it is the means. Now, while it is clear you are devoted to Shoshana in the higher realms of your being, you still need to put aside your pride and obey her in the simple things she asks of you. To give you some space around your fantasy and to help you work with it, I invite you to acknowledge that it is not only your inner masochist that you need to bring out into the open. There are 2 other potentialities within your shadow which you need to acknowledge and give voice to. These are the sadist and the rescuer. Clearly, the sadist is the one who wishes to control. The rescuer, meanwhile, is the part of you who wants to help people, but less from love and more from a need to have power and relevance in their lives. It is born from a desire to avoid your own issues by fixing others. These 3 roles, sadist, masochist, and rescuer, arise from the division of self in childhood, and they can be tricky to identify. I also want you to notice how at the core of the masochist lies a sadist, while at the core of the sadist lies a masochist, and within the rescuer lies both sadist and masochist. To varying degrees, what I am saying to you is relevant to everyone, and I invite you to work together to help one another recognize where each of these roles resides within you. Learn to see how you often play them out without realizing. It will make it easier if you give each role a name, which symbolizes how it manifests within you. I want you to explore each one using role-playing games. We will call this practice Sadopasana, and as with Shmantra, you will always ask permission from each other before playing a particular role, stating clearly what you want to achieve with it and agreeing on safe boundaries. Initially, it might also help to wear a particular hat to designate which role you are playing. I believe I have said enough about this now, and you can take it from here. Sheila became quiet, and Shoshana said, "What an excellent idea. Everyone, please go and bring as many hats as you can find." Some of us went to our rooms and came back with hats which we piled on the table in front of Shoshana. "Let's start with you, Shmeiki Baba," said Shoshana. "Choose a hat which represents your masochist." Shmeiki Baba chose Mei Ling's black beret and put it on. "Now," said Shoshana, "close your eyes and allow yourself to see your inner masochist and give him a name." Shmeiki Baba thought for a while and said, "Brian." "Why Brian?" asked Shoshana.
"Because he's not the Messiah, he's a very naughty boy,"
he said. "And does your masochist want anything?" asked Shoshana. "Yes, he wants to be a child, to be given clear boundaries and to be absolved of guilt," said Shmeiki Baba. "Yes," said Shoshana. "Now, let's look at your sadist. Choose a hat you feel represents him." Shmeiki Baba chose Simon's New Yorker baseball cap. "Can you give your inner sadist a name?" asked Shoshana. "That's more tricky," said Shmeiki Baba, and he thought for a minute before he said, "I'll call my sadist Justice." "And what does Justice want?" asked Shoshana. "Revenge on people for disrespecting and betraying me," said Shmeiki Baba. "Yes," said Shoshana. "And now choose a hat for your rescuer." Shmeiki Baba chose a turban. "What's he called?" asked Shoshana. "That's easy. Guruji," said Shmeiki Baba. "And what does he want?" asked Shoshana. "For you to see how clever I am and to look up to me," said Shmeiki Baba. "Yes," said Shoshana. "Can you also go a stage further and identify the core of the sadist which lies hidden within your masochist?" "I think so," said Shmeiki Baba. "I will call him Trojan Horse." "Why's that?" asked Shoshana. "Because he's hiding and he's thinking, I'll show you what happens when you try to control me." "Bravo," said Shoshana. "And can you identify the masochist which is hidden inside your sadist?" asked Shoshana. "Yes," said Shmeiki Baba. "I will call him by my original name, David." "Why?" asked Shoshana. "Because, like the biblical character, he wears the blood of conflict on his hands." "Psh," said Shoshana. "Who else would like a go?" Kamal was the first to volunteer, and one by one we all took turns to identify the roles we liked to play, usually without realizing. Then Shoshana asked us to split into groups of sadists, masochists, and rescuers, and to choose partners and begin playing out our roles. I was surprised by how much my inner sadist was begging for expression. Afterwards, Shoshana said she wanted to spend some time alone with Shmeiki Baba, and the rest of us went out to explore the ups and downs of Shimla. We climbed Bantani Hill, enjoyed the mountain views, and walked around the then dilapidated summer palace of the former Maharaja of Sirmaur. Later, we went back down to the mall to eat momos, which are Nepalese dumplings, and I particularly enjoyed the steamed spinach and yak cheese ones. We also stopped to drink a beer, though Kamal drank a juice, It was then that I realized that he didn't drink any alcohol, nor did he smoke, use drugs, or even caffeine, and yet he was always cheerful. We continued as far as Observation Hill in the far west of Shimla, and finally we returned to the guest house. Remembering the role-playing game we had played earlier in the day, I asked the others if it was okay if I played rescuer, and when they said yes, I gave encouragement to those who were struggling to get up Jakku Hill. When we finally got to the guest house, Shmeiki Baba and Shoshana were in the restaurant chatting to Kaku, looking very cheerful. I heard Kaku ask Shmeiki Baba if he would give evening darshan, which in Indian tradition is a meeting with a holy person. Shmeiki Baba explained that he could not offer a darshan, but he could offer a marshan. Kaku said he didn't understand, and Shmeiki Baba pointed out of the window and said, "Look up to the heavens, brother, and connect with the consciousness which exists throughout the myriad of dimensions." Kaku looked confused and said, "So please give us your Martian." "Om Shmeiki," said Shmeiki Baba. Saturday, April the 29th, 2006. Kaku invited many people to hear Shmeiki Baba give evening Martian, and he offered a special thali, which was to include tadka dal, curried lentils, Kashmir paneer masala, cottage cheese and tomato, ginger and fennel curry, and chapati, homemade soft flatbread, all for just 250 rupees. In the evening, the restaurant filled up with our group, other curious travellers and spiritual seekers. At 8 p.m., Kaku rang a bell, and soon after, Shoshana appeared, wearing a long black leather dress, and she was leading Shmeiki Baba behind her on a rope which was tied around his neck. She sat down on an elaborately carved chair at the end of the restaurant, and Shmeiki Baba sat cross-legged at her feet. It seemed that he had found a way to reconcile being both the spiritual leader and Queen Shoshana's slave. I felt mixed emotions about this. On the one hand, I loved them both and was so happy about what they were manifesting, but I also felt envious because harmony between them meant that Shoshana was likely to pay me less attention. I did my best not to let this get to me and tried to be meditative. Shmeiki Baba sat with his eyes closed until Shoshana touched him on his shoulder and he began to chant in tongues, very quietly at first and then louder and louder. I felt goose pimples on my arms and the energy moved fast around my body. And again, Sheila began to speak through Shmeiki Baba. Sheila 12. Shmeiki Baba, it has taken a long walk and a strong woman, but it is safe to say that you have finally begun to lower your array of juvenile defenses and are now able to harmonize yourself with your fellow man, with the world, and the Great Mother. Completing this work will transform you into a real son of the multiverse. It will allow you to truly earn your title, Shmuruji. I want you to keep Shoshana as your main focus, and to remember that surrender does not need to happen once. It is a process which needs to be reaffirmed time and again. Remember also that the key to containing your emotions lies in accepting all sides of yourself. By doing so, you will save yourself and maybe even your world. Sheila stopped speaking, and Shmeiki Baba did not move at all. You could have heard a pin drop until, after about 30 seconds, and without warning, Shmeiki Baba shouted, "Boo!" and everyone got a shock. "Just you wait till we get upstairs," said Shoshana. When the laughter died down, Shoshana said there were some things she also had to say. "Love is the glue which holds our universe together," she said. "It is everywhere, but often we are blind to it. When I say we, I especially mean men. In truth, our species has no lack of female awareness. It is therefore right that the men should follow the women. I am happy to say that Shmeiki Baba and the other men in our group seem to understand and accept this. Tomorrow we shall be leaving for Dharamshala by foot. There will be a meeting afterwards for those who are interested to join us. But first, Shmeiki Baba will answer any questions you have. A number of people put up their hands. What happens when we die? Asked Hassan from Iran. After stroking his beard, Shmeiki Baba answered, You might say that the hand of the Great Mother withdraws from our bodies and our souls return to the log of the one multiversal soul. And then what happens? Asked Hassan. We remain there until we are ready for reactivation as new biological organisms, at which point we're sent to the data exchange where we're matched with our parents-to-be, said Shmeiki Baba. How many times does this happen? Asked Hassan. As many times as it takes to become resolved, said Shmeiki Baba. And how many times is that usually? Asked Hassan. Sometimes thousands, said Shmeiki Baba. Why so many? Asked Hassan. Because each time our souls come here to resolve certain problems, they keep on picking up new ones, said Shmeiki Baba. Do you have any techniques for accepting death? Asked an older South African woman called Leslie. Yes, we can use death visualizations, said Shmeiki Baba. What are they? Asked Leslie. Well, the best way to explain is by trying one. Maybe we can do one right now, said Shmeiki Baba. Sure, said Leslie. Shoshana nodded her assent. Okay, said Shmeiki Baba. Get as comfortable as you can. Take a nice, slow, deep breath in and out and again. And when you are ready, allow your eyes to close and begin to sink down into your body. Now bring your attention to your toes. Maybe you can feel one of your toes more than the rest. Maybe your big toe, maybe your little one. Whichever it is, allow that sensation to grow. Let it fill your feet and your legs and also your torso, your arms and your head. Feel yourself as one, and as you take another slow and steady breath, allow yourself to imagine that you are sitting comfortably on a flight to Mumbai. You have been given a free upgrade to business class, and you feel lucky and content. You are relaxing in the comfortable seat, savoring the gentle perfume of the air hostess as she passes by, offering you a glass of champagne. You feel an overriding sense of calm spreading throughout your body and mind. Gradually, you drift off into a peaceful sleep, and you remain like that all the way until the plane begins to descend. Suddenly, there is a loud bang, and you wake with a start. And now there's a jolt, and another enormous bang. Something terrible has happened. The captain comes on the intercom and says, Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to give you bad news, but we have flown into a flock of birds and both our engines have been damaged. We have no option but to attempt an emergency landing at sea. Please remain calm and put on your life vests, but do not inflate them until you are outside the aircraft. Fasten your seatbelts, and when I say brace, assume the brace position. Once we have landed on the sea, make for the nearest exit. The plane is going down, and as it descends in eerie silence, some people cry, others begin to scream, and panic spreads throughout the cabin. You remain composed, though, and you focus intently on the sensations in your body and your heart beating fast. You look into the eyes of your neighbor and exchange brave smiles, accepting that your ride in this world might be about to end. Brace, brace! In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and bang, the left wing hits the water and breaks off. It feels like a hard car crash. And now, a much bigger bang. This is the main impact. It is so violent that you black out. It is dark. It is quiet. Maybe you are alive. Maybe you are not. Either way, it is not so bad. Now, if you survived, when you are ready, slowly come back into your body. Wiggle your toes, take a deep breath, open your eyes, and begin to sit up.
Wow, said Leslie. How often do I need to do this?
As often as you feel the need, said Shmeiki Baba. Do you believe in the Bible? Asked a Dutch woman called Deborah. Well, I believe it exists, said Shmeiki Baba. But do you believe the Bible is the word of God? Asked Deborah. Yes, said Shmeiki Baba. You do? Asked Genevieve, surprised. Yes, I believe the Bible is the word of God, just like the phone book and every other book for that matter, said Shmeiki Baba. How do I go beyond my fears? Asked Ananta from England. Acknowledge them and allow yourself to connect to the pain which lies beneath them, said Shmeiki Baba. And how do I do that? Asked Ananta. Well, different things work for different people, but maybe I could show you one approach with the help of a simple Satipasana exercise, said Shmeiki Baba. Shoshana nodded again. What is it? Asked Ananta. The face-slapping circle, said Shmeiki Baba. I don't want my face slapped, said Ananta. That's fine, but maybe some other people would like to try, asked Shmeiki Baba. A number of people said yes. Okay, so with Kamal's permission, I will begin by slapping his face, making a special effort to focus on my breathing as I do so. It is important that I hit him with love and with a relaxed hand, avoiding the cheekbone and ears. My intention is to cheer him up with my slap, not to hurt him, just like this. Shmeiki Baba slapped Kamal on the face. I can see the light. Careful, Kamal. It might be a train coming, said Shmeiki Baba. Shmeiki Baba asked Kamal to pass the slap on to his left. It was Crispin who was sitting there. Crispin nodded, and without hesitation, Kamal hit him hard across his face. People winced. Now, Crispin, stay present and watch the feelings and thoughts arising from the slap, said Shmeiki Baba. Ananta was sitting on Crispin's left, and Crispin asked her, Ananta, maybe you are willing to receive my slap. Oh, go on then, she said. Crispin hit her. She fell to the side with the force of the blow. Crispin looked frightened at what he had done, but when she sat up, Ananta was glowing. Now I understand, she said. Yes, Ananta, well done, you did it. Now keep going. Pass the slap on from person to person, said Shmeiki Baba. And Ananta turned to her friend and slapped her soundly. I was amazed that people who you never thought would hit each other were merrily slapping each other's faces. Shoshana asked if there were any other questions, but it turned out that our minds had been sufficiently stilled, and it was time to eat Kaku's delicious-smelling thali. After dinner, Vikram, our tea sponsor, arrived at the guest house with Guttridge, a thin man in his 60s who wore a long white beard. Vikram explained that Guttridge would carry our kettle and our tea all the way to Dharamshala. Meanwhile, there were 4 more people who were interested to join us for the remaining 2 weeks of our walk. After the existing members of our group had introduced ourselves, the new people introduced themselves. First was Fernando from Chile. He was short and swarthy and seemed to be a rather Dionysian character, outwardly confident and competitive. He said he was interested to try a femdom relationship and explained that he had managed to travel around India for nearly half a year, almost without money. How is that? Asked Genevieve. Well, said Fernando, when I first arrived in India, I went down to Varkala in Kerala because I was told it is a good relaxing place to start. My intention was to stay in India for 6 months, and I brought with me $5,000 in cash, which I saved up while working on a cruise ship. Haven't you heard of traveller's checks? Asked Kamal. Or a credit card? Asked Genevieve. Of course I have, said Fernando. So why didn't you use them? Asked Shoshana. I guess I needed to learn a lesson, said Fernando. So what happened? Asked Shmeiki Baba. Well, for my first week everything went great. I spent my time meeting lovely people, enjoying the beach and learning yoga. Every morning an old woman would pass by my guest house offering to do laundry. When I had nothing clean left to wear, I gave her all my dirty clothes. Only later in the day, when I was on my way to the beach, I remembered that I had included my money belt in the bundle of clothes, said Fernando. No way, said Crispin. Yes way, said Fernando. What did you do? Asked Shmeiki Baba. I went to the owner of my guest house, and he took me to the old woman's house. She gave me my clothes washed and folded. Among them was my money belt, but the money was no longer there, and when I asked her for it, she denied ever seeing it, said Fernando. She did not launder your money appropriately, said Kamal. Definitely not, said Fernando. So what did you do then? Asked Shoshana. I went to the local police with the owner of the guest house, said Fernando. Did the police believe you? Asked Kamal. Well, although I had no proof the money existed, the police chief agreed to bring in the old woman and her family for questioning, said Fernando. After conducting an interview with them, the police chief said to me that he believed that they had taken the money, but in order for them to confess, he would have to beat it out of them, and he asked me if I agreed to this. And what did you say? Asked Shoshana. I said no, and the police chief looked at me like I was crazy, and said that in that case there was nothing he could do, said Fernando. And then what happened? Asked Genevieve. That was it. I went back to the guest house, said Fernando. I bet the police beat the shit out of the family anyway until they gave them the money, said Crispin. You might be right about that, said Fernando. To a simple family, $5,000 is like us finding, I don't know, $50,000, said Shmeiki Baba. Enough to risk dying for, said Genevieve. Indeed, said Fernando. What did you do afterwards? Asked Shoshana. The other tourists at my guest house were really supportive. They held a whip round for me and collected $200, which they gave to me. I also approached the Chilean embassy to tell them what had happened, and amazingly enough, they gave me another $200. I was really careful with this money, said Fernando. Still, it's not very much, said Crispin. Yes, that's why I found out where all of the Vipassana meditation centers are in India, and I went from one to the next, doing their free courses and volunteering as a helper. That's how I've managed to get almost enlightened, and to stay in India for nearly 6 months. It's also why I want to take part in your great walk, because I want to go to Dharamshala, and this way I won't have to buy a train ticket or pay for guest houses, said Fernando. I see, said Shoshana. The spotlight turned to Meredith from Wales. She was blessed with the most magnificent red hair and a freckled complexion. I bet the local people don't leave you alone for a moment, said Genevieve. That's right, said Meredith. They are definitely shocked by my hair, so I often cover it with a scarf to make life easier. Meredith seemed kind and gentle, and Shoshana asked her, Do you have any experience with femdom? Not yet, she answered, but I'm eager to try, and a mischievous smile appeared on her face. Wonderful, said Shoshana. Fabrizio from Naples in Italy was next. He was quietly spoken and seemed deep and sensitive. I like to smoke a lot, he said, but I also do yoga every day. I've been to India many times, and I feel it is my home. In fact, the last time I returned to Italy, I was so unhappy that I lost my eyesight.
No way,
said Mei Ling. Oh yes, said Fabrizio. It was terrifying. I was taken to hospital, where the doctors ran all sorts of tests, but could find no cause, and they diagnosed me as suffering from a rare condition called hysterical blindness. Isn't that what some conscripted soldiers used to suffer from in wartime? Asked Shmeiki Baba. Yes, said Fabrizio. And how did it get better? Asked Shoshana. When my brother said he had booked me a flight back to India, my sight began to return, said Fabrizio. Did it ever happen again? Asked Shoshana. No, probably, because since then I have been staying in Asia and have no intention of returning to Europe, he said. Finally, we turned to the tall, svelte Severine. Well, I do not have so many stories about myself to tell, she said. I am a dancer from Paris and I like nature and eating healthy food. Her accent was soft and her voice sweet like a bell. Sister, do you like reggae? Asked Crispin. What, because I am black, this means I have to like reggae? She asked. I guess that was the implication, but I realize now that I was making a racial stereotype, and I'm sorry, said Crispin. That's okay, I forgive you, said Severine. Shoshana said, Friends, what we are proposing here is to walk to Dharamshala as a femdom group. This means that the Shmeikinis are in charge. It's going to be challenging, and we'll only be successful if we are all clear about what we do and don't want. To this end, it's best that we split what we don't want into soft and hard limits. Can you explain what that means? Asked Fernando. Yes, said Shoshana. Soft limits are things you don't really want to experience, but you might be willing to experience under certain circumstances. And hard limits are things you are not willing to experience under any circumstance. It is important we do this so that our game does not turn into abuse. Is that clear? Yes, said Fernando. So who would like to suggest something they do want? I will, said Mei Ling. Good, said Shoshana. I'd like the Schmarman to make camp, cook, clear up, and dispose of trash, said Mei Ling. I'll second that, said Shoshana. Does this cross anyone's limits? Asked Shoshana. No one objected. Good, said Shoshana. Anyone else? I'd like the Schmarman to obey all orders issued by Shmeikinis as long as it does not endanger their lives, said Genevieve. Does this cross anyone's limits? Asked Shoshana. Again, no one objected. I want to have the right to reward and punish the Schmarman as I choose, said Mei Ling. Very good, Mei Ling, said Shoshana. Does that go for all Shmeikinis? They all said yes. And does this cross any of the Schmarman's limits? Tentatively, the Schmarman shook their heads. Now, Shmeiki Baba, would you like to give an example of hard and soft limits? Asked Shoshana. Yes, said Shmeiki Baba. For me, an example of a hard limit is anal penetration. It's not that I'm against it, but I have to think of my hemorrhoids. Okay, said Shoshana. By the way, how's the Jerusalem balsam working? Very well, actually, said Shmeiki Baba. Excellent, said Shoshana. So what about a soft limit? Golden showers, said Shmeiki Baba. Noted, said Shoshana. There's something I would like to add, said Shmeiki Baba. Go ahead, said Shoshana. I think it's important to say that where I might lack self-love and fear abandonment, it might be difficult for me to be authentic about my boundaries, as I might tend to agree to things that I later regret, said Shmeiki Baba. Thank you for sharing this, said Shoshana, and for this reason we must start gently and give others good time to react to our intended actions, and we will also use safe words. I suggest we have one word for pause and another for stop. What should the words be? Asked Severine. How about Deepak is for pause and Chopra is for stop, said Shmeiki Baba. Good idea, said Shoshana. Guys, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have to say, this just isn't for me. I'm out, said Simon. Everyone said they were sorry to hear this. I'll be happy to meet you guys in Dharamshala, he said, and with that he went upstairs. If truth be told, I was quietly pleased he was not continuing with us, as he could be a bit heavy. Is there anyone else who has a problem with anything that is being proposed here? Asked Shoshana. No one else did. Good. By the time we reach Dharamshala, said Shoshana, the Shmarmen will be new men, the sort we need, the sort this world needs. Amen, said Mei Ling. Guttridge had been listening quietly to our conversation, with a look of bemused surprise on his face. Shoshana turned to him and asked him what he thought of our proposed game, and Guttridge said, We humans are able to align ourselves with pure consciousness directly through inner inquiry or indirectly through external devotion to a form. It seems that you are attempting to do both. I was surprised that Guttridge understood what we were talking about and that his English was so good. It seemed strange to me that he should be carrying a kettle for us, and I began to wonder who he really was.